Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, September 15th. Welcome to a joint committee session by the Transportation and Environment and Economic Development Committees. We have one item on our agenda today, and that is the Air Park Community Advisory Committee's 2025 annual report. I want to first thank Councilmember Dawn Luedtke for not only serving on this committee, but introducing the legislation to reestablish this committee after its disbandment a number of years ago, because the air park is on the top of many of her constituents' minds in her district. The report recommends a number of items and actions that the MCRA should improve outreach with its neighboring communities by developing a noise complaint tracking system accessible in multiple languages, including Spanish, to reflect that there is incredible diversity within that community, and improve transparency by publishing noise complaint summary data in both English and Spanish. There is a lot to discuss today by all the people who are here. First, as we work through this, I want to turn it over to the joint chair of this committee, Chair Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Glass. Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm very happy to be here today. And again, thank you to Councilmember Dawn Luedtke, who has been focused on this issue. No question about it. The air park is an important piece of our economy and provides valuable services to our residents. We need it, but we also need it to work better, to modernize, and to be more harmonious with the surrounding neighborhoods. I am hopeful that this work session, the ongoing work of the Advisory Commission, and the continued stewardship by the Revenue Authority will result in meaningful improvements. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to a great conversation.
Thank you. And now turn it over to District Councilmember Luedtke.
Thank you, Chair Glass and Chair Fanny Gonzalez. And I want to give a big hearty thank you to our committee chair, Skip Reindollar, and two of our committee members who are here, Dale Tuttle and Lynn Benz. I'm going to do your name wrong. Benzion. Okay. I have an allergy to something that has a similar spelling, and it's not how you pronounce it, so I apologize. This was incredibly important to me to have a forum for addressing these issues, but addressing them in a way that brings multiple stakeholders from different perspectives together at the table. My concern about the prior iteration of the group that had convened was it became sort of a raise of concerns and oppositional, if you will, as opposed to problem solving. And I wanted to make sure that this committee had deliverables. And I want to commend you all for your attention to detail, your methodology in trying to come at these issues, the list you were tasked with responding with, in productive ways that required gathering information, discussion, listening to one another, and not just raising grievances without saying why, what for, what are we going to do about it, right? That was incredibly important. We've had multiple meetings. We have gone above and beyond what we're required to do to notify about the meetings. And I have personally, in my own newsletters and my own communications, tried to make sure residents have been aware of the work of the committee over time, and wanted to make sure that folks knew that we were engaging with the FAA. And I remember when we had the first kickoff of this committee, there were residents there who were in attendance to watch the meeting who were concerned, and they said, if the FAA governs all of this, what's the point, right, if we can't change it locally? And the answer is exactly what you've put in the report, which is to marshal together the different pieces of it, figure out what's working, what's not, where the gaps are, and how to better address it. Because while we do not have local unilateral authority to make certain changes, there are things within the county's control that could be done to address these gaps. So with that, I want to turn it over to our committee, the actual committee members here on our joint economic development and transportation and environment committees who will lead this. I certainly will have questions for everyone at the end. And I want to thank our representatives from, I was about to use the acronym again, Montgomery County Revenue Authority, or MCRA, for being here. And Joe, I know you're not sitting up at the table, but I want to recognize Joe Popsill from the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, who has been staffing the committee's work since its inception. So thank you, Joe, for all of your hard work. And with that, I turn it back over to our chairs.
Thank you for that overview and those thoughtful comments, Councilmember. I also want to recognize and acknowledge that Councilmembers Stewart and Sales are joining us virtually, so they are part of this conversation as well. Before I turn it over to Mr. Kenny to walk us through the packet, I think we should start with introductions so everybody knows who is at the table. And so if we can start over here.
Hi, I'm Justin Bolam. I'm the airport manager for the Montgomery County Revenue Authority.
Hi, good morning. Keith Miller, CEO of the Revenue Authority.
Good morning. Lynn Stein-Bencion, resident and member of the Airport Community Advisory Committee.
Good morning, Skip Reindaler. I'm the chair for the Air Park Advisory Committee.
Dale Tuttle, a member of the Air Park Committee, and I led the data subcommittee.
Thank you all for being here. We know there are also a lot of people who are following online who wanted to make sure they had the Zoom links and the YouTube links. So thank you all who are comfortably wherever you might be. With that, turn it over to Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. I'll provide a brief background and definition of terms. There are a lot of entities and acronyms and names floating around, so just want to give a brief overview of the subject matter here. So the Montgomery County Air Park, which is located off Air Park Road near the intersection of Woodfield Road and Snuffer School Road, is owned and operated by the Montgomery County Revenue Authority under County Code. The code authorizes the MCRA to engage in a specified list of projects, including airports and landing fields, which is where this comes from. The MCRA is responsible for the maintenance and operation of air park runways, taxiways, navigation aids, and other common areas, and serves as the grant sponsor for federal aid. The MCRA leases the hangars and terminals on the air park property to a private entity known as the Montgomery County Air Park One Limited Partnership. This private entity is also known in its capacity as the fixed base operator for the air park under the name DC Metro Aviation Services. So these names can, for some purposes, be considered interchangeable. The Federal Aviation Authority, the FAA, retains the sole authority to regulate domestic aviation in the United States and governs a lot of the activities at the air park, both directly in terms of just regulating aviation, as well as through various grant assurances through the support it provides the air park. These assurances include provisions that prohibit the MCRA from restricting the number of takeoffs and landings by air taxi, flight school, and other commercial ventures at the air park, as well as not having too much discrimination in terms of which customers are served by the air park. As part of this FAA regulation, neither the county nor the MCRA has the authority to redesignate the air park property for non-aviation use without FAA consent. There have been many documented impacts on neighbors from the air park ever since the 1960s. There's some more data on that, certainly in the ACA, in the Air Park Community Advisory Committee's report, but also some additional information in the packet and in the Office of Legislative Oversight report from 2022 that is cited in the staff report. But in 1974, the council amended the code to require that real estate agents disclose the existence of an airport or heliport within a 5-mile radius of a property that is up for sale. So that is something that has acknowledged the impact on neighbors. After 20 plus years of service by the Air Park Liaison Committee, the Air Park Community Advisory Committee, ACAC, which was referenced in the opening statements, was established by the Council in 2023 to advise the Executive Council and MCRA on air park operations, community concerns, safety, and community impacts. We are here today to hear from the ACAC regarding their first annual report, their 2025 annual report. They have a presentation here to walk through the findings and recommendations of that report. And we have as well the MCRA here to provide an additional presentation with their perspective and some responses to that report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenny, for that overview. I'd like to turn it over to the committee itself, since this is a work session and hearing on your report. So turn it over to Chair Reindahl.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the sponsorship for the committee. My name is Skip Reindahl. I've been a 35-year plus resident of Montgomery County, former Marine Corps pilot, commercial pilot. I have a plane that I own, Mooney, at the air park, so I'm a user of the air park actively. I do a lot of volunteer flights for those of you who like rescues, pilots and paws. And I am also in the business community and have a lot of experience with aviation maintenance, so I also manage an aviation maintenance business right now as I'm easing into retirement from the IT industry. So I hopefully will bring a wealth of knowledge here, and I want to acknowledge the committee itself. You've created an awesome committee of citizens with very diverse backgrounds to put this report together. The first thing I want to say is what you have in the report from the voting members is a unanimous opinion on everything that was in that report, and that should speak volumes on what that report provides. You've got 3 neighbors from the surrounding communities on the committee. You've got 2 pilots and business owners or managers from the air park. You've got a retired FAA controller to give you FAA type input. And you have a member of the Montgomery County Economic Development team in the committee as well. What's notably missing is the flight school seat has never been filled yet. That may be telling as we begin to discuss some of the report. And we also have some ex officio members from the County Council, Councilmember Lukey, County Executive, and the MCRA as well. Those all sit actively on the committee, but they're ex officio members. And I do want to thank Joe, because he's been awesome for the last year. So thank you very much. The committee did a standard process of we identified problems, we analyzed those problems, and we came back with solutions and recommendations. Kind of just a simple business process. Our analysis produced evidence-based, so for everything that is in that report, it is evidence-based. We can produce evidence for everything in that report going forward as we talk about this. We only had 12 months. This is the first report. We wanted to get something on the street. I will tell you, and the committee is unanimous on this, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm going to start out with the bottom line up front, and the ask of the council is we firmly believe that the council can exhibit leadership, pressure, guidance on the MCRA, the County Executive, Department of Transportation, and the committee itself to help come to some solutions to some of these recommendations and problems. You are critical in providing that leadership. You established the legislation to establish the committee. It has produced actionable results. We can disagree or agree on many of them, but the fact is the air park is a portal to this county, and we have to figure out how to improve the community impacts, how to improve safety, how to improve the business environment at the air park, and how to produce or improve its ability to contribute to the economic abilities of the county. I will be very candid as we slide to, or next slide, please. There we go. Yeah, there we go. I will be very candid, and when I took this role and we all came together on the committee, we thought this was just going to be about noise and community impacts. That's what we thought. The three neighbors that were on the committee, I will tell you, we have all morphed into unanimous opinion that what we identify, we started with the noise, we started with the operations. This airport has as many operations as Frederick. Okay, it's one of the busiest airports in the regional area. One runway, one short runway. Now think about that. That's what we thought we were getting ourselves into. And as we peeled this back, what we really found was a lot of issues with the management of the airport, the DC Metro management of the airport under the master lease, the lack of MCRA governance on facilities, economics, business impacts, across the board, and that kind of gave us the top 5 recommendations that you see in the report. The committee is unanimous in stating that when you have an environment such as you have at the air park, flight schools are low return, they're low margin businesses. When you have an environment that is like the air park with facilities issues, it's kind of a Wild West. There's no governance. Everybody does what they want to do. That fosters the behavior of some of the tenants of the master lease, as well as the large flight school out there. This is one of the most dangerous airports to fly into for general aviation and commercial area because of the flight schools, and they just do what they want. And so it's got to start with better governance and leadership with the entire air park community. What we found was the MCRA fails to enforce the master lease. There are many provisions in the master lease that were not enforced, specifically FAA grants. The FAA provides grants, and there's grant assurances that certain things be done at the airport and the airport facility. Business, ability to maintain planes, hangars, all of these types of things are grant assurances, and there's a lot of violations there that have never ever been, DC Metro has never been enforced to make sure that they maintain the facility and exercise their work in order to stay in compliance with those assurances. These put the air park at risk for having to return that money or not get future grants that can enhance the air park. The commercial leases, from the business environment perspective, commercial leases there are month to month for a business. You will not be able, that's not even near conformance with Maryland standard commercial leases, month to month. No business wants to invest. Okay. And on top of that, it has been mandated for years that DC Metro mandates a sole source contractor to do any work on any of the facilities. You have no choice. That may be changing, I don't know, but that is a grant violation right there. Okay, so the businesses are really tied and hamstrung. Leaking roofs, flooded hangars, damaged equipment, etc. And even the repair processes, although they've just instituted finally, because the committee has identified this issue, even repairing facilities has been fraught with just delays, inadequate, poor quality repairs, etc. A lot of businesses have had equipment damaged, thousands of dollars. The aviation business is very expensive. And recently, a tenant at the air park filed an FAA grant violation on hangar wait lists. The DC Metro controls the hangar assignments. It's not public, whatever you want to call it. And many believe there's favoritism involved in getting hangar assignments. And again, aircraft are very expensive, and you have to maintain them. And getting hangar assignments, people are on for years and never get a hangar. But somebody comes in the next day, they get a hangar. So a lot of questionable stuff there. Next slide. One of the other findings was the MCRA ignores the hangar lease violations. All of the leases are approved and oversight provided by MCRA. Last year and early this year, an aircraft owner, a resident of Montgomery, passed away. There's a process for an abandoned aircraft. That process was not followed by the master lease tenant. That aircraft, DC Metro Aviation Services, literally disassembled that in one of the hangars, right there, open doors, disassembled that aircraft and sold the parts for, we don't know where the money went. Okay. MCRA was aware of this. This occurred. A police report was eventually filed and investigated. It finally came to light in an ACAC community meeting. The bottom line is this is the stuff that goes on at the air park. Tenants are forced to use a sole source contractor. One of the hangars was reskinned or rebuilt starting in September to December of last year. A building permit was not filed, even though in March of 2024, DPS, Department of Permitting Services, sent a letter with a number of fire code violations, as well as the fact that the hangar needed a permit to be built. No permit was used. The hangar suffered from serious flooding. One of the businesses that actually was run out of the hangar has now left. Another business there is still suffering, what are we, 9 months later, still suffers with flooding such that it's very difficult to perform aircraft maintenance in that hangar. Those corrections, even though they did put a French drain in now, the hangar still floods. There's still a 1 foot gap in the door. Poor quality workmanship, no permit. This is the stuff that's going on at the air park from a facility standpoint. Fly friendly. Okay, the fly friendly process has been years old. There is a process now that the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association recommends to better establish a fly friendly process. That involves working with the community, the residents, the pilots, the air park, all getting together to work together to define a fly-friendly program. While there is a noise abatement procedure at the air park, what we did find was it was not well broadcast. Most pilots didn't even know about it. Since the ACAC has mentioned that in December of last year, there's been more and more awareness. But we believe that needs to be revisited as an effort of outreach with the community, both residents, pilots, flight schools, so that we can all come together and work together and have a stake in creating that fly friendly, which would then potentially make it more usable and executable because everybody had a stake in doing it. That's another recommendation that the committee has. Next slide. Economic impact. The air park is the far left. The air park is easily an order of magnitude less in the number of jobs, the number of economic impact, state and local tax revenues of all the regional airports in the DC area. It has the biggest single benefit of any of the regional airports. It is the closest to DC and the easiest to access metro to get anywhere you want within the region. The economic impact, revenue is the third letter in MCRA. We believe that the economic impact is so poor at the air park, it can go nothing but improve. And when you improve that environment, you're going to cause, and we need to do more research on this, we're going to cause a ripple effect, and that will impact the largest flight schools. Flight schools like to operate in an uninhibited, uncontrolled environment because the flight instructors want to be able to do what they want to do when they want to do it. If you go and look at those other regional airports, and we went up to Frederick and talked to the airport manager at Frederick, they did have a flight school problem. That has since been corrected. And if you look at what they're doing economically, yes, they do have a tower. That is a main differentiator, and that's something the committee needs to look at for the future. But the point is, from an economic impact standpoint, there is really nothing being done to improve the economic impact, the business outlook, or change the makeup of the entire air park itself. When you focus on things like that, even a little bit, you're going to change the whole construct of the air park. Therefore, you have a higher probability of changing the makeup of the flight operations in there. Maybe taking it from 80,000 to a much lower number. That flight school that's no secret is well over 20 aircraft. Okay, I came from a squadron of 16 aircraft in the Marine Corps. 20-plus aircraft is a lot of aircraft. And that's thousands and thousands of operations at this airport because of that. And yes, the FAA says you can't inhibit it, but there are things that we can all do together with the council's leadership to help change the makeup of the air park, improve it, and have an impact, a positive impact on the community and the safety issues. I do have a slide on recommendations. It's in the report, but for effect, to share what happened to me personally last week, I received a cease and desist letter from DC Metro Aviation to stop basically talking and sharing any of these facts, information, issues, and whatnot. All right, that's what's going on at the air park. A business received that as well that was interviewed by the committee. Okay, so the committee believes that we, as Montgomery County, and in the last sentence or the last paragraph in the executive summary basically says it. This is Montgomery County. Okay? I served here 30 years as a firefighter. I coach at Magruder High School field hockey. This is a good county. We have the best fire department, the best police department, the libraries, the schools. We need to have the air park up there on that list as well. And by doing that, we can help deflate some of these community issues for the residents, make it better for them, make it safer for them, make it economically viable, and have a positive impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Reindaler, and for you and your fellow committee members for producing a very thorough report, and for your distillation of that into just a few slides. Very much appreciated. And just want to make a fine point on the last comments that you made about the legal actions. We are not going to be weighing into those legal actions today, but we are aware that they have happened or they are in the process. So thank you for raising that. Turn it over to the Revenue Authority. Mr. Miller, if you want to, you or Mr. Ballum, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Glass and Chair Gonzalez, and the members of the T&E and ECON committees, as well as other council members present for hosting this conversation. Do we have the slide up? Or? Okay. Sorry. Good. Well, I'll get started. I would also like to thank the ACAC members for their work and dedication over the past year. While the ACAC report reflects a high level of engagement and concern, certain sections address issues that fall under the jurisdiction of agencies such as the FAA, DPS, and county legal, rather than the committee itself. We appreciate the committee's dedication, the data they have gathered, and the outreach efforts reflected in the report. Our response is focused on providing clarity, education, and transparency, and we remain committed to working collaboratively and ensuring the legal and enforcement matters are directed to the appropriate authorities. Our presentation will cover the main points of the report, clarify MCRA's commitments, and suggest items the ACAC should review next. The report provides extensive discussions regarding the facilities of the air park. The land of the air park was donated to the MCRA in exchange for a 99-year lease with Montgomery County Air Park 1 LLC, and who now operates as DC Metro, to build and operate the air park. The lease can be described as one-sided, as it was initially created to protect the lessee. This is not the first time that the operations and facility conditions at the air park have been raised. It has happened several times in my 20 years at the MCRA. Additionally, it happened more extensively before my arrival. In the early 2000s, the air park faced significant pressure leading to numerous inspections by county agencies and pressure from the FAA regarding grant assurances. The FAA claimed the MCRA did not have adequate control over the runways and taxiways, which was a violation of grant assurances. The result was a 2004 amended lease, which maintained all of the same protections of the original lease, but reduced the leased area. After all the inspections by county agencies, the buildings on the property remained unchanged. The revised lease also included an addition of an airport manager from the MCRA. It is important to note that prior to 2004, the lessee had full control of the air park, and the MCRA did not have any staff dedicated to the property. As you can see, the dedicated lease area contains all of the hangars, tie-downs, and fueling areas. The remaining property, which currently consists of runways and taxiways, are controlled by the Revenue Authority. Therefore, the Revenue Authority has limited control over the buildings and operations referred to in the lease, and we must work within the terms of the lease agreement and with other government agencies such as DPS and the Fire Marshal. The air park is operated with a lot of oversight and control. The air park is part of the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. The MCRA manages and ensures compliance with federal, state, and local agencies. The layers of bureaucracy and oversight are rooted in safety and ensuring the long-term viability of the airport. As you can see, with the FAA, we deal with the Washington Area District Office, the Flight Standards District Office, and we adhere to the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. The state of Maryland is responsible for licensing, inspecting, and setting the minimum standard for airports. On the local level, we deal with the county agencies. We understand the users and the community's desires to make changes, and we share a lot of the same feelings. However, we must navigate the master lease and the numerous governing bodies. As an example, I would like to review two situations that were referenced in the ACAC report. The hangar wait list. The hangars are located on DC Metro's leasehold, and through the master lease, they are responsible for maintaining a system of leasing them that is in compliance with the FAA's grant assurances. DC Metro has referenced the maintenance of a waitlist program for many years. Earlier this year, we were contacted regarding potential issues with the waitlist and people potentially being skipped. We immediately informed DC Metro, and as the grant sponsor, requested a copy of the waitlist, which were not given to us. Due to the lack of response, we had to involve our attorneys. We met with the people who raised the concerns and informed them of our situation and that they could file a complaint with the FAA. A complaint was filed with the FAA, and the FAA has now requested information from us. As a result, we have just received information in response to the FAA's request from DC Metro. We will continue to work with the FAA and DC Metro to resolve this matter. Another example referenced in the report was the HRO hangars. The report cites conditions of the HRO hangars and that they were built without the proper permits. Prior to construction, the MCRA had called in the Department of Permitting Services and requested a review of the hangars, including the HRO hangar. DPS did a review of the hangars and sent an email, which is included in the ACAC report. MCRA sent notice to DC Metro. DC Metro requested permission to rebuild the HRO hangars. We approved the project as a concept and noted, as per the master lease agreement, it is their responsibilities to obtain all permits. Shortly after construction started, we sent notification to DPS that construction had started and inquired if the permits were in place. After construction and the issues were discovered, we met with DC Metro and their contractor and found that they did not obtain the necessary permits. We contacted DPS and informed them of the situation and asked them to come back to the air park. After inspection, DPS has issued a violation notice to DC Metro, and DPS has involved us that they have been in contact with their contractor, who is working to resolve the matter. As shown by the above examples, the MCRA is proactively managing the air park, but must coordinate with multiple agencies and go through the process. We understand that the process can be frustrating for those involved, but it is also a system that ensures safety of the operations and economic viability of the airport. The report also cites stagnant economic development, which, as stated above, we agree with. The MCRA has been working on developing the property outside of the leasehold to offer users alternate spaces and increase the economic impact of the air park. The north pad, highlighted in red, was initially installed in the 1990s with the FAA grant to satisfy an FAA grant obligation for the opportunity of competition at the air park. We have met with several entities since the early 2000s to develop this area, but each discussion ended because it would be too costly to run the necessary power, water, and sewer to the area. Over the years, the MCRA has worked with the FAA to move these items closer. First, by moving the electrical vault from the terminal building to the midfield, that is the black square, of the property, and in the last 10 years, we were able to locate water and sewer to the property line on the north end entrance. Just last week, we received an FAA grant to fund the design of a new hangar. And we have construction grant programmed in our FAA grant program within the next 3 years. The development of this initial hangar will lead to the development of additional hangars on the north end area, which are already part of the airport layout plan. In summary, we plan to continue to work with the lessee and governing entities to ensure that the existing facilities are maintained at the appropriate levels, while also pursuing new development on the property which we control to help improve the economic impact of the air park. Aircraft noise. Noise is the most impactful part of the air park operations on the local community. There are significant misunderstandings of what can and cannot be done. The FAA establishes the noise measurement system, which determines if there is a problem. The 65 DNL limit measurement is at the property boundary of the air park. Therefore, the FAA states it is limited in what it can do to reduce aircraft noise at airports like Montgomery County Air Park. However, any local noise or access restrictions must be reviewed and approved by the FAA under the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. However, again, the FAA states that noise is the local airport's responsibility. Therefore, we need to go back to the beginning to fully understand what was missed, as this understanding determines a lot about what can be done. This is an early photo of the air park with no development surrounding it. The most impactful thing a local airport can have on noise is to control the development around the air park. This picture tells part of the story. In the 1970s, as development was moving to the area, the air park established a right-hand turn pattern, which directs all pattern traffic to the side depicted by the Church of the Redeemer in this photo. The change was made to accommodate the development of Flower Hill and Montgomery Village areas. However, as you can see, the county later permitted the development of communities to the north and east of the air park, Church of the Redeemer side, where the air traffic was moved to accommodate the development on the opposite side. Although there is less density, which was probably a compromise at the time, there is still housing on that side. This leaves us with very little opportunities and options to control noise. Moving the pattern only results in moving aircraft over the homes that may have researched traffic patterns before purchasing or have lived for years with no impact from the air park. Restriction of aircraft by time of day or number of planes flying at any time are not permissible, as the director of the FAA's Eastern Region stated. Aircraft noise. Noise complaint data has been the subject of numerous conversations over the years. In 2021, at the recommendation of the ALC, the air park adopted an online complaint system utilizing FAA's best practices. Based on the system, the air park collects complaint data for residents living within 6 miles of the air park. The reason for this distinction is that aircraft operating outside of 6 miles may or may not be using the airport. Therefore, complaints outside of 6 miles are referred to the FAA noise complaint system. The number of complaints recorded in 2021 were significantly lower. I should say recorded before 2021, were significantly lower and were submitted by telephone or email. The addition of the online system resulted in a significant uptick in complaints. However, it was discovered that some local residents had purchased a bot system to file noise complaints automatically. Additionally, there was a concerted online campaign asking residents to file noise complaints. 2025 is trending to be an 85% decrease over the high number of complaints in 2023. Given the history provided, the way the FAA measures noise, and what the airpark can do, we have to review the end goal of collecting this information. Since the airpark cannot restrict air traffic and moving the pattern will only result in moving the noise over more densely populated areas, we have to understand the goal of collecting this data. We believe that looking at the unique number of households complaining, 106 unique residents have complained since 2021, and their location provides a more accurate depiction of the noise issue versus a volume of complaints from a small number of households. However, if we can establish a clearly defined goal of what the noise data will be used for, then we can review the possible modification of the noise system. So what has the airpark done? As stated by the FAA, a way to work together is through voluntary restrictions and the establishment of fly-friendly guidelines. Based on meetings with the previous Airpark Liaison Committee, the users of the airpark adopted a voluntary restriction on touch-and-go activities from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. daily. Again, this is a voluntary restriction and unenforceable by the airpark. The manager does speak with anyone who does touch-and-go training during these hours, and we are happy to report it is generally followed. However, it is essential to emphasize that a pilot doing touch-and-goes is not violating any regulations if they choose to do them during those hours. The second way to work together is fly-friendly guidelines. We worked extensively with the Airpark Liaison Committee and the community to update the fly-friendly guidelines in 2021. Working together, we made modifications to the pilot guide, which is given to all new pilots who store their planes at the airpark, is handed out and posted in the terminal building. On the front page of the guide, which is pictured, the noise-sensitive areas are clearly marked and called out in a notice to pilots. Additionally, the noise abatement procedures are closed out. The noise-sensitive designation is often another area of confusion for residents because the FAA requires planes to fly at an altitude of 1,000 feet while flying over these designated areas, except when in the process of taking off and landing. The FAA further clarified that planes in the pattern, anywhere in the yellow part of on the guide, are in the process of taking off and landing. Therefore, a plane anywhere around the airpark can be categorized as in the process of taking off and landing and can be below 1,000 feet. It is also important to highlight that the noise abatement procedures, which are to turn a heading of 340 as soon as practical and to climb at the best rate when departing runway 32. However, a plane staying in the pattern using runway 32 will remain in the pattern and not turn 340. Page 2 of the guideline includes a call out for noise abatement suggestions. Remember, we cannot require these, if pilots do not adhere to them, they are not violating any procedures. Additionally, working with the ALC, we made changes to the airpark website and also added on-site signage reminding pilots of the fly-friendly guidelines. This is a picture that the pilots walk by as they walk out to their planes from the terminal building. In addition to these changes made to the fly-friendly guidelines, we also continue efforts to educate airpark users on the importance of these guidelines. If a pilot is observed not following the fly-friendly guidelines, they are contacted and reminded of their importance. We conduct regular meetings and discussions with flight schools and clubs. We have conducted 4 meetings with the FAA safety team in the last 3 years alone, and AOPA is scheduled to present on non-towered airports at the next meeting in December. In summary, there is a fly-friendly guideline in place, which was most recently updated in partnership with the Air Park Liaison Committee. The program includes signage, website, pilot's guides, encouragement, reminders, education, and promotion to all the users of the air park. We welcome the ACAC's specific recommendations on how we can improve the program again. Safety. We often hear and read confusion from residents that loud aircraft are operating unsafe. As detailed, the noise surrounding the air park is unavoidable and can be loud. We want to emphasize that anyone observing an aircraft flying in an unsafe manner should immediately report that to the FAA's Flight Standards District Office, FSDO, in Baltimore. Only the FSDO can investigate and take enforcement action on flight safety. The FSDO accomplishes this in several ways. One way is to park in areas surrounding the air park and observe the pilots from the ground. The FSDO has stated that they have observed the operations at the air park on several occasions and have found no violations during their observations. Additionally, the FSDO recommends complaints, reviews complaints received, and investigates if necessary, and makes a final determination, which may result in action against the pilot. Again, this is an area of frustration and confusion with the community because planes operate differently than cars on a road. They do not follow the same path, and each time because of many variables that need to be considered. Items such as the type of plane, the temperature, the wind, other planes in the area, and as stated by the FAA, the pilot in command of the aircraft is directly responsible for and has the final authority regarding the safe operation of an aircraft. Therefore, the FSDO must consider these and other factors before determining if there is an action against the pilot. So although we may want to say a plane went outside of a geofence area, they violated something, it isn't true. First of all, the noise abatement procedures are voluntary. Secondly, the FSDO is the only entity authorized to make that determination. As you can see, there are many different checks in place to ensure aircraft are operating in the safest way, and only the FSDO can investigate and take enforcement action on flight safety. However, it can be confusing to the residents living in the area. We welcome recommendations from the ACAC on how we can improve community outreach and education.
Mr. Miller, I'm just going to jump in real quick. The slide that you're showing, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that that is a graphic representation.
Yes.
And that actually did not occur.
That actually did.
Okay.
I will actually further go on to say that is the power of AI.
There you go.
There it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The MCRA remains committed to the continuing dialogue and working together to find solutions that have a positive impact on the community surrounding the air park. In response to the ACAC's report, the MCRA commits to the items listed, as well as improving transparency. We have committed to following up, based on the ACAC's recommendations, on making significant changes to our disclosures and information provided on the websites, as well as the other items referenced before. We would like to request that the ACAC review the following items in the coming year. A control tower. We believe the addition of an FAA control tower at the air park is the most critical piece. As the MAA states, it puts the governing body in charge of the property at the property. The controllers have the authority to ensure everyone follows the noise abatement procedures, to prevent overcrowding of the pattern, and the authority to limit touch-and-go operations. We believe adding a tower has the potential to have the most significant impact on the community's concerns. Develop specific recommendations on ways the MCRA can improve our fly-friendly guidelines. Provide recommendations on ways to improve community outreach. We also recommend and ask that they review and recommend changes to the council for the new home buyer notification that will improve awareness of those in purchasing homes in the impacted areas, and provide stated goals of the noise complaint system and provide specific recommendations for the modification of the system to achieve the stated goals. In closing, we appreciate the ACAC's work and Council's engagement. As stated, we remain committed to continuous improvement, transparency, and partnership with all stakeholders, and we look forward to working together to address the community concerns and support the airpark's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for the very thorough presentation. Lot to digest there. And I see members of the committee. I was watching them during the presentation. Clearly, there are points that they understand and accept and support, and there are questions that I have, not speaking for them as well. But first, let me turn it over to the committee, because we are here because of your report and because of your active engagement. And Mr. Reindaler, you not only serving on the committee, but because you are an aviator yourself, I think you clearly are uniquely qualified to lead this discussion and lead the community dialogue. In addition to the fly-friendly guidelines, there are a number of other very salient points that you raised about the utility of the air park, right? The economic impact and some other things. I'm just curious from your perspective, from the committee's perspective at least, as we work through these challenges, and clearly I've heard some of the proposals from the Revenue Authority as to how to mitigate and enhance some of those economic opportunities. Do you see some of them at odds? How do we work through some of this from your perspective?
If you're speaking specifically to the economic areas, it's quite stark. If you, as a pilot, I do a lot of cross-country flying, 400,000 or 500,000 miles away kind of thing, and it's quite interesting when you go to other states and you land and you're in the middle. The example I always use is like Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I've gone down there for pilots and pause rescues. It's poultry farming and pig farming, right? And you go in and you land at this airport and you walk in and you're like, whoa, like they have a facility here that is inviting, commerce. And the airports are nothing but off ramps from freeways. These are portals into communities, and this is counties generally set those up across the country, set these airports up to invite economic growth and development. Frederick is the prime example, and I only know that because we're in the process of researching building a hangar up there and talking to the management up there. Their airport reports, I think, to the economic.
To their economic.
Yeah.
Turn your mic on. Yeah.
Their airport reports to their economic development department, and I will tell you, it's stunning. When you first walk up there or go up there, given the chance, I'm going to take it, Skip. Yeah. When I visited, the first thing I saw was not an airplane. The first thing I saw was a father and his toddler standing outside the fence near the picnic tables and the beautiful grassy area for them to be there so they could watch the planes. This was community happening. And when I left, there were two other fathers there. So locals are using it. But when I toured the facility itself and I saw the building, after you land, the building you go into, it is stunning. It is beautiful. It is welcoming. I'll let you make your own conclusions about ours.
Thank you for that perspective. Mr. Reindaler, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, it's that just kind of goes with the environment. When you create a vibrant community within the air park infrastructure, and you also involve the community in that as well, you're going to change the entire culture of the airport. And when you change that culture, and I believe we do have, and the committee, again, needs to do more, we have a lot more work to do to try to provide some good evidence that says when you begin to change that culture, you're going to change the behavior, for example, of the larger flight school and the operations. Frederick did this. So, but real quickly before I punch off on the mic, I do want to thank the MCRA for a lot of the changes. Since we identified a lot of this fly friendly and people not adhering to the turn to 340 for noise abatement, the MCRA has put up more signage. It did add that information to the pilot service that pilots listen to before you take off. So there have been some marked positive changes, and that drives home the fact that the committee is markedly different than the previous committee, and that we are trying to work together to enable this change, identify issues so that they can be addressed. And I think that's healthy. Thank you.
Very much appreciate that. I think to the casual observer, this is about noise, quite frankly, right? And clearly through this discussion, we're getting to deeper issues. And the other question I have before turning it over to colleagues, Mr. Miller, within the Revenue Authority's portfolio, it's quite vast. It's everything from the air park to golf courses to a winery and restaurant, right? And so within your leadership of the Revenue Authority, how do you all view the air park? Because the data is stark that it is the least performing, economically speaking, air park in the region. It clearly, I would say, is the most challenging air park as well, given the geography. It is not in the middle of a pig or chicken farm. It is in the middle of a community, well-established community, and there are needs that need to be balanced there. But clearly there are ideas that are being proposed that are worth considering. So have you considered them?
Yeah, and thank you for that. I think, as I kind of review everything, it's we all want immediate response. And I think that's probably the biggest frustration. As I alluded to in the report, we're frustrated too. We think there's so much that can be better. But there are restrictions on what we can and cannot change. I mean, I can't unilaterally go in and change a agreement that's legally been in place for 99 years, is in place for 99 years. I can't just go in and do that legally. So we have to work within, and that's probably the biggest challenge, is working within all the entities, understanding all the frustration. But as I alluded to in the report, we are constantly looking forward. Right? So when we realized, and the biggest opportunity was given to us in 2004, was the designation of the lease area and the availability of property for us. So we immediately started pursuing opportunities as to how can we develop that. Again, hit with challenge after challenge, right? But we just continue to keep going. And so now we are finally at a point where we can develop that north end. As we would love for the lessee to go ahead and improve facilities and make changes on the leased property and so on and so forth, but we can't force that. So what can we do? We can control what we can control, right? And so that's why we started to look at the north end and developing that north end. What can we put under our control that then, by its own presence there, puts pressure on the other side, right? In addition to that, helps the economic development of the air park. The air park, Frederick was talked about a lot here. Frederick train changed dramatically. When did Frederick train change dramatically? It was after 9/11. And the flight restrictions. One thing that isn't referenced is that the air park sits inside of the special flight restricted area. A lot of pilots don't want to fly into that. So that puts Frederick and makes Frederick the closest airport to DC that's not inside the flight restricted areas, which helps them. In addition to that, we also have to remember that the flight air traffic control tower that is in Frederick was offered to the Revenue Authority and to Montgomery County Air Park many years ago. It was the community that spoke very loudly and turned that down, and that's why the air traffic control tower went to Frederick. That, as was alluded to, they had problems with their flight schools at that time, but once you install that tower in and you put the FAA in control of the property, now you can start changing the behaviors of what's going on in that pattern. And so for us, it definitely has its challenges, but we continue to look at what we can control and focus on that, and that's where we believe we're going.
Appreciate that additional context. I'll turn it over to my co-chair.
Thank you so much. There's one thing we have in common here. We all want to move forward and modernize this facility. There's no doubt, and I want to one more time thank Councilmember Don Lukey for bringing us together and moving this forward. I have two things that I wanted to raise. One, the air traffic control tower that you were talking about, that will lead and solve so many issues related to compliance. So how can we make that happen? I'm still not clear.
So it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be a lengthy process.
Everything is a challenge in this life.
Everything.
How can we make it happen?
So here's the biggest thing. You're talking about a $25 to $30 million investment. Okay, so we also let me back up. What we're asking for the ACAC to conduct. They've done a great job in getting different perspectives and enlisting and getting that information. The first thing we need to determine is there support for a tower at the airport. There's pros and cons that can be discussed about it, right? Some people are going to say, and the argument's been made, that it's going to increase traffic. I think what Chair Skip just referenced a little while ago is probably pretty accurate, right? It brings in the traffic we want. It limits and lowers the pattern traffic and gets the traffic in that we want, which is the business community. However, what we're asking is the ACAC to take this initiative on. Go ahead and look at that. First thing we need to do is determine that there is community support. After we determine that there's community support, then we have to lobby the FAA to see if they will make us part of the grant of the program. What the program consists of is the local community still has to build the tower, which is about $25 to $30 million. However, the FAA, if you get involved in it in the grant and the tower is built, the FAA staffs it. So it is not on the local community to pay for the staffing. They are air traffic control. It is the FAA that staffs it. So that it's a process.
I think, yes, to me that's like number one, and it links with, and I'm so happy that you mentioned the importance of community involvement, community engagement, and it should be led by the community. I think that's number one for the next meeting that you're going to have and see, and as you mentioned, communicate what are the pros and the cons and have folks decide. So that's one. The second thing that you mentioned was the home buyer notification issue. I want to ask council staff to dig into this, because that sounds to me like an easy one that we can just take on, like as a council, focused on and make sure that starts happening. So if we can follow up, and maybe you can communicate with the two committees on what needs to happen, so that's moving forward. That's a simple recommendation that you all don't need to work on. We can take that on. And the last thing I'm going to say is simplify. So thank you for all your service. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Great minds think alike. My 1 and 2 is control tower and home buyer notification. So I do want to talk about the control tower. I think that absolutely. I think that it would bring a level of rigor and compliance and enforcement to this whole issue. So I think that that's important. From the community perspective, I know we spoke about the control tower and the possibility of pushback. I think that it's an educational piece. It's an educational campaign of what the tower will and won't do. And I think that the concern that it will expand traffic, I mean, we'd have to talk about that. You would have to talk about that. But the idea that it would greatly increase the compliance is the better deal, I think. So I fully support the tower and moving quickly on that. Home buyer notification, of course, is important. I don't know the answer to this. Is there any planned new development in the area? Does anybody have that information? So when we start looking at home buyer notification, we should consider, Mr. Kenny, if there's any. I don't think there's any greenfield site residential available, but let's kind of look at that with that. And then there's so many things to unpack. The lease agreement, Where are we in terms of this lease agreement, in terms of the numbers of years?
It expires in April of 2059.
2059. Okay. Now, is there any provision in the lease agreement in terms of performance metrics?
No, unfortunately not. Again, the challenge is, as I stated earlier, it's kind of a what I view as a one-sided lease, right? It was a donation of land at the time, and so they were developing in exchange for that donation, they built the airport. And so the lease was really designed about protecting them in operations. I understand the context of going back, 50 years ago. However, no, there is not. There is provisions in there that we, again, continue to review with our attorneys. It's a regular ongoing discussion. What can we hold them to? That's reasons why we had DPS out there to take a look at the buildings. What can we do in regards to that? So we have to, those are the types of metrics, I guess maybe I'll clarify that. Those are the types of metrics that are in place, yes.
Okay, and I guess from the perspective of safety and compliance and just following the law, all of those things, they have to do all of those things just outside of the lease, correct?
Correct, and I'll just clarify that a little bit. So safety and compliance is two different things, safety and compliance in the buildings and so on. That would be, I just want to emphasize that one of the reasons why the runways and taxiways was kind of cleaned out in that lease is because the Revenue Authority is responsible for the safety, the air safety and of the property. And so that's what is handled every year with the MAA. And they come in and do the licensing inspection to make sure that the runways, the lighting systems, everything is operating safely. There's clearance on trees and approaches, things of that nature. It was taken away from the lessee and put with us. So two different distinctions there and safety, but I think important to recognize.
Okay, thanks. And then, of course, from the economic development perspective, I understand the. It in one regard, the asset is that we're the closest regional airport to DC, but I would guess that I wasn't even thinking about the restrictions, but also the further out, the more valuable it is because you don't have the DC airports. So I think when we talk about economic development, we need to think about the role that this plays in the region. I could see Easton, Hagerstown is more valuable because we don't have three national, international airports right close by. But it would be great to compete on a level of the amenities that Lynn mentioned. Stein-Benzion, excuse me. So I think that I so appreciate the committee's in-depth analysis and report. And I think that, and of course, thanks to Councilmember Lutke for restarting the committee. And it sounds like you're doing a great job, and can't wait to see the second annual report. Yes.
I do want to provide some input from a pilot's perspective, since I fly a lot more than the average pilots. But this flight restricted zone is it's a downer for some pilots, but consider the fact that the majority of the operations at Gaithersburg are flight schools. So more than 50,000 of those operations or flight schools that have absolutely no issue with the flight restricted zone. I will tell you, as an individual that flies a lot of cross-country flights, comes back in all types of weather, the FAA and air traffic control are there as my whoopee, my security blanket while I'm flying. The most dangerous part of the flight is coming into Gaithersburg. And the reason is because, as the air traffic controller will tell you, I have multiple targets at Gaithersburg, and the pattern is well overloaded. I have popped out of the clouds on an instrument approach and found flight schools in the pattern and when they shouldn't be. And the tower is part of that FAA air traffic infrastructure and has the ability to meter and moderate all of that. And one of the things, we have our next fiscal year meetings tomorrow night. One of the things is, I think everybody's correct. We're going to need to involve the community in this to have everybody understand that the tower is there to provide control, metering, and additional safety. It is a safety mechanism. I will tell you, flying 3.5 hours from the Midwest coming back, I'm tired and I'm fighting weather. All of my alternates have towers. That's just my rule. And coming into Gaithersburg increases the risk. It increases my awareness. But boy, if we had a tower here, it'd be a lot easier and a lot safer and improve or lessen the impacts to the community. We've got a long way to go, admittedly, in order to involve the community in that process. But sponsorships such as yourself and the leadership and working with the county executive's office, DOT, and the MCRA will be critical in moving forward with that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Miller and Mr. Chair and members of the Economic Development Committee, our packets for the organization, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. And just wanted to go back to the revenue. Based on some responses I received from Mr. Miller over the weekend about the air park's cash flow being cost neutral, how does the air park budget for unexpected costs, like repairs or upgrades? As we've mentioned, businesses may avoid an air park with outdated equipment, which is going to have unintended consequences like impacts on our economy and them choosing a more attractive air park elsewhere. So just wanted to find out how often the air park evaluates the need to update key infrastructure like the hangars, the electrical systems, to prevent businesses from relocating elsewhere or not even deciding to renew leases or choose Montgomery County.
Thank you for that. So two distinctions there. Again, when you get to the hangars and things of that nature, that is all controlled by the lessee, right? So we have limited authority there. It's their cash, it's their expense to redo the hangars and upgrade and so on and so forth. That inherently is a challenge, right? Is because we have a vision, which I think we share a lot with the representatives of the ACAC and others in the community, and what should be there, but we don't have the right to direct that. And from us, from a revenue authority standpoint, it is a zero cash impact to us because we don't have any control there. Where we do have control is on everything else related to safety. It's the runways, the taxiways, so on and so forth, property around the air park to make things safer. We have received well over $20 million in grants from the FAA over the last 10 years. We have an extensive program with the FAA to continue to upgrade the critical pieces of it. I'll give you a couple examples. In the last 10 years, we rebuilt the entire taxiway system, including the lighting, the roads, and the pavement and everything else. We just received the grant last week. I know I referenced the grant for the design of the hangar, but we just received the grant from the FAA as well to replace all the lighting on the runway, which is failing quickly. Justin spent a full day last week trying to find with an electrician trying to find a failed lighting system that happened last week. So this is critical, and these projects are going on. But it's important to raise that the FAA support and the planning that we do over that long-term period is critical, and receiving those funds are critical for us, because that's how we do it. Is basically we're either getting 90% or 95% of the funding of these projects from the FAA or a combination of the FAA and MAA. So that is, that funding is a critical piece, and that's what we do in regards to it.
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Chair.
All right, so in the work the committee did, we did go through the master lease, and there is an important section in there, section 11, which is maintenance and repair, and it does require the tenant, DC Metro Aviation Services, to make sure that all the leased premises and all the buildings are in good condition, state of repair, following applicable local codes, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is how much can that be leveraged in order to define what is good condition and state of repair? If you were to compare that to other airports, we probably fall on the very low end of that spectrum. So the question is what is the standard? We don't have an opinion because we didn't research that. I just do want to point out there is specific language on maintenance and repair in the lease.
Thank you for sharing that. Has the landlord, the lease holder, been invited to any of these advisory committee meetings? Has there been any invitation to meet with him to discuss outstanding repairs?
So DC Metro absolutely is invited. They are open meetings, so literally everybody is invited. That said, it has definitely been our experience that unless people receive a personal invitation, they don't always realize that they're invited. We did interviews with, I think it was 15 businesses, and DC Metro was one of them. Okay. And actually, we were hoping to do a second interview with DC Metro and just never quite were able to schedule that. So fortunately, we have more time in the next year to continue those discussions. I will tell you that interview, DC Metro is also very passionate about this facility. It's a little bit personal. It's family business.
Okay.
And that's okay. That's okay and a good thing. They're very passionate about doing this. I think they too would like to figure out financially feasible ways of improving the facilities. That said, they are also kind of used to things operating the way they operate. And it can be difficult, having worked with many, many businesses over my 20 plus years as an economic developer. Sometimes we have to work with businesses over a period of time to help them discover that there are some possibilities that they haven't really thought of yet.
Okay.
So I think I will let you know, I think it's hopeful.
That's reassuring to hear. That's good to hear. And you mentioned that the air park recently received 90 to 95% from the FAA for any projects. How is that communicated and decided which projects they'll fund and which projects?
Yeah, so there's meetings that happen all the time with us in the FAA as far as facility planning meetings. Basically everything, it kind of goes through a process, but everything is designed around an airport layout plan, which has been in place for 20 plus years at this point, which shows kind of all the infrastructure of the airport. And then projects from the FAA, and the way that's decided is projects are then rated by importance. So safety issue projects get a higher ranking than, kind of maybe in this case, maybe a new hangar build or something. If the FAA is looking at a new lighting system on a runway versus a new hangar, guess which one's getting programmed first, right? So there's a programming that goes into that, and then that develops our long-term plan. We've got a 5 or 6 year plan with the FAA. And then, of course, I always have to mention is that plan that's put into place with the FAA finally comes down to authorization and funding available from the federal government. So projects and part of that whole reappropriation of the FAA as it happens from time to time can impact projects as well. And so that's, it's kind of, it's a pretty lengthy and detailed project. Just that I'll take it another step, next step down. When we come over as part of our CIP plan that we come over to the county council about, that plan from the FAA is part of our package. So we're lockstep in that through the approval process. And that's how everything is updated.
Thank you, Keith. And then given that the air park is in compliance under FAA guidelines, the MAA license, the Maryland Aviation Administration, your license is up to date. Has the air park ever been denied a license for renewal?
No.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding the noise regulations, it was pretty easy for me to go to the website and see the multiple forms for people to navigate and make complaints. You also showed the table of how many complaints you see. Is this information shared with the advisory committee so they can also report to the members about complaints received, complaints resolved, and any outstanding complaints not resolved?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I believe there was a subcommittee which was involved with taking a detailed look at that. And again, that's why it goes back to our references. I think, what I stated in my presentation there is that we have to understand what we're really trying to achieve with that data and then determine if there needs to be a modification to how we receive and process that data. But yes, that was shared, and I will also reference this as part of the recommendation and part of our transparency. We are now going to make that part of the website. So that is not available on our website right now, but we will, and we plan to make that change based on the ACAC's recommendations.
Okay. And is there any concerns regarding language accessibility? Do we need to include other languages on the website as well?
Yeah, again, that was raised by the ACAC, and we are absolutely committed to looking into that and making sure everything is accessible.
All right. And then can you explain how MCRA manages tenant communications, the process for handling repair tickets, and the expected time frame for resolving issues, or is this all done through the landlord?
It is all done through the lessee. Yes,
Okay.
that is their property. It is involved with that. Again, when issues raise, to the next level, which I'll refer to as the HRO hanger raised up to the next level, that's when we enlist folks at Department of Permitting Services and things of that nature to make sure everything is in compliance. But the complaint system, I think the chair referenced that DC Metro just recently made a change to their complaint system. I shouldn't say complaint system. I think it's their service ticket system, I think is what they just recently changed. But that is all at the purview of DC Metro as the lessee in controlling those facilities.
Okay. And then my last question. Thank you. My last question regarding our Department of Permitting Services. Is there a liaison that comes to the meetings to share updates regarding outstanding issues or concerns?
So the answer to that is no. This was discovered as part of the research and analysis, in contacting DPS. Quite simply, it was just a meeting with the head of DPS inquiring what was going on, and then they said, well, we inspected it, and this is what we found. You need a permit, there's fire code violations. We did pass that on to the MCRA, I think in one of the spring meetings for action, but it was just a simple outreach from the committee to DPS to uncover or identify what the experiences were in issue. All
right. Thank you so much. I yield.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Great. Well, thank you. Going later in the queue makes a lot of the questions I had already raised. I just want to say thank you to the committee, to Mr. Miller at the Revenue Authority, and particularly thanks to Councilmember Lukey for all her work on this. I just actually have a general comment listening to everyone because I think what I'm hearing from folks, both the committee and the Revenue Authority, is that there's frustration. We want things to improve, to work on these issues, and Mr. Miller, we understand there are a lot of different levels of bureaucracy that you talked about, and some for good reason, for safety. But I will say that in hearing and reading, and I appreciate the presentation because it was it provided more information. But when I first read the Revenue Authority's response to the committee, there seemed to be a lot of like, not us. This is somebody else. And I appreciate some of the things you've raised today because of what you're working on. But I think it would be helpful for, those of us who are on these committees to know if there are things that you are advocating for or looking at that we can be of help with. I know Councilmember Lukey is really intimately involved in this. But again, it seems that there are a lot of common issues here that working together, we can think about how to address. And I would just, emphasize that we are here to help if there are things that need to be either leveraged or looked at with other agencies. I think we want to do what's best for the community and the air park, and I think you're hearing that from my colleagues here on the committee. And I just wanted to say that I'd like us to move forward. I'm hearing there are a great deal of frustrations in some of the processes and how we're able to do things, but I think we can identify some ways to really address some of these concerns. So just wanted to put that out there because a lot of my other questions were already raised, and I know Councilmember Lukey probably has some points she wants to raise as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now we'll turn it over to Councilmember Lutke.
Thank you. First, I just want to clarify something because when there was a point made about how enticing this particular general aviation airport might be versus Frederick and the flight restriction zones. So isn't it true that there are different layers to what is required inside the flight restriction zones? Like there's a 15-mile radius, which is kind of like ICC and down, if you want to think about how the county is configured. And then there's above that up to 30 miles outside of the nation's capital. Is that right? Sorry.
Yeah, so the secure flight restricted area is essentially broken into two simple pieces. There's the flight restricted zone, which is really around the key government buildings in the district. So if you draw a radius outside of that, that's definitely you're staying away from there as a general aviation. There's specific instructions on how to get in there via TSA and secure processes. Gaithersburg lies within the outer ring, and it merely is you file a very simple electronic flight plan, which takes all of about 35 to 50 seconds,
right.
And then you call them, you get a code, you go out, you come in, and it's just it's a pretty simple process. But essentially, you're just monitored by air traffic control while you exit or ingress into the area, simply.
Right. I raised that only because, and we deal with other things that fly around here in the county that belong to the county, and we've had to explain why does our Gaithersburg MCPD drone as first responder drone get wider coverage than our down county drones, and there is a reason because the rules are different. And of course, the Gaithersburg/Montgomery Village drone site is in that less onerous area, which is why we get bigger bang for the buck in the up county. So I just wanted to make that clear. There are differences in that, and I apologize because I wrote questions down as I went along, and they're all over the place. So, all right, I've sent several letters to the FAA. In my capacity as the district council member, I also did the FOIA request on behalf of the committee. And I like to think my FOIA request was pretty darn specific. I also think the questions I sent to the FSDO in response to two now safety incidents that have occurred since I came into office, with the electrical tower crash happening about a week before I got sworn in. And my assessment of their responses has been underwhelming and unimpressed. And frankly, it scares me that they are so meh about safety concerns and issues that are being brought to them. And I know what I've done. I know what we've raised and tried to elevate as the committee. I know that since the committee has been in place, we have, through my office, been coordinating with Senator Van Hollen's office and with Congressman Raskin's office. We all acknowledge DC is a weird place right now, right? But some of this advocacy started well before the change in administrations, so I can't blame it on that. And I, since you all, the Revenue Authority, Mr. Miller, Mr. Pullum, you have to deal with the FAA on an ongoing basis. What I want to know is, how many times since that electrical tower crash have you had to, turn the heat up on the FAA over concerns? And how does that look when you do that? By what mechanism do you do it?
So I think there's just a continuation of it's ongoing. Okay, we've had situations. I'll share. And you're aware of this. We communicated on this. Last year we had concerns regarding one of the flight schools there. We raised concerns to the FAA. We raised concerns through the lease agreement on renewals, and we challenged it all. In the middle of all that process, the FAA came back and recertified and relicensed that school right in the middle of it all.
Right.
And so, it takes things away. Since then, we have been in further communication regarding little incidents that have happened. And we've raised this concern again. We continue to raise this and work with FSDO and raise these concerns of things that are happening. The biggest thing we can do, and we've expressed, quite honestly, we've expressed a concern that, this has to be dealt with before something bigger happens.
Right.
And we've raised that. I know you've raised that from your office as well, and appreciate your support, because that frustration that you're feeling is the same that we feel. But we can continue to do that, and we got to continue to do our part in making sure those concerns are heard. But that's as much as we can do.
Yeah, and I'm going to call on you in just a second, but I just, for, the millions watching at home, as we like to say, it's really just my parents. But anyway, after the wingtip incident in the spring of 2024, they did send out inspectors to come take a look at the flight school that was involved, whose aircraft had the wingtip fall off onto our public safety training center. And the day they came, they found multiple aircraft from that flight school that were not flight worthy and were in disrepair. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And that same day after they left, that flight school had a flight take off from the air park and crash in Carroll County at their small little airport, right?
Yes.
And I keep coming back time and time again. This is the same school over and over where we've got ongoing problems, and yet the FAA says, that's cool, we're going to recertify you, keep doing what you're doing. Is there not enough that's been papered, if you will, going to the FAA to say, this isn't just a couple of homeowners who are complaining about this. We have the responsibility for operating this air park. We need help. And since you're the only one who can do it, you're the only one, because the Maryland Aviation Authority can't take away the flight school's license, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So the FAA's got to do it. So what can be done by MICRA to help elevate that more? Because this hasn't been elevated apparently enough, despite my own efforts, for the FAA to say enough is enough. And it's not clear to me what meets the standard for FAA's enough is enough. And the night we had our public testimony at the committee, where we allowed residents to sign up and express their thoughts and whatever, and we had several commercial pilots come, military pilots come, and the media was there. And they were about to interview me after the meeting, and they had to bolt because that was the night of the crash down at National Airport. The irony of it all. We're trying so desperately to get the FAA to pay attention to us, and it's not working. So what can the Revenue Authority do to help elevate that?
Well, I think we have gone to all different levels of the FAA and raised these concerns to the highest levels that we can. I know Justin meets on a regular basis when FSDO is out at the airport. I think the next step, quite honestly, is, we recently had a meeting with Congressman Raskin's office. I think that is probably the next level where we need to be, is we need to be with, our federal delegation and raising the concerns in that regards. That would be my next step, and our next step will be continue to raise that, and I think we all work together on that, and raising that issue on the federal level. It has to come from the federal level,
Right.
Because as you said, we sit here and get very little response. We sit here and raise the concerns and wave the flag, but I think that is probably the next step, is us working together on the federal level with our federal delegation.
Well, I would respectfully request that communications be documented.
Yeah.
And not just worry about what's said in a meeting.
Oh.
Because I think that it's important, even if you have a meeting, then you send the letter to summarize what we've just discussed today. Thank you for this. These are the outstanding items, all the many things, with a copy to Senator Van Hollen's office, Congressman Raskin's office, the council president's office, and the county executive's office, so that they know this isn't just, you guys having a conversation. We mean business, right? And to the points about the lease, the lease is a 99-year lease. It had an amendment in 2004. Clearly, it can be amended, right? It's a contract. I'm assuming there's language in there somewhere that allows you to amend or modify upon agreement of the parties. And I'm also assuming, if it's a halfway decent agreement, that it has a termination provision for cause. And if it doesn't, it should. Because that's not helpful when you're talking about a 99-year span of time where safety standards change, buildings are added, other things are going on. We're in the process of, and nobody raised it yet, and I might have threatened to make a bingo game for this hearing to have certain phrases, but nobody mentioned the lead fuel issue, but I know a lot of people have that concern. That's the EPA's, right? And while they're working towards the unleaded fuel for aircraft, they're not there yet, and depending on the age of the aircraft, they cannot, in fact, use it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that's something that's ongoing, but that's not something we can do here locally, but we are following it. Would it be fair to say that those noise complaints, when you were looking at the data, that it noted in one column, it said top 3 and it said a percentage. You're talking about top 3 households that accounted for thousands and thousands of complaints. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Are they, if you know, are they households that are within 3 miles of the airport or further out?
About 3 miles or so is the farthest one.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Are pilots from the flight schools flying too low outside the immediate air park zone? And is that leading to increased noise complaints?
Well, that is a challenging one, as we stated in the presentation there, is that, that was part. So just so everybody understands, the congested area around the airport, we worked with the community extensively to get those designated. We actually lobbied with the community to get all those designations made. But again, to your point, are they flying too low? That can only be determined by FSDO, right? Again, the only ones that can make that determination. As I highlighted, is that what they came back to us with is, if you're in that pattern, so anywhere in that yellow guide, which basically is the area surrounding the airport, you're in the process of taking off and landing, which means you can be below 1,000 feet.
Right.
It's one of those ones that we all get frustrated with, right? Is kind of, we're there, but they can be below. But even if they are below, then you got to look at why were they below, right?
Why? And there's, if you're talking about below 1,000 feet, there's a difference between 750 and 400.
Correct.
Right.
That is correct.
And so there's variability there that could be addressed, but again, by what mechanism would they be held accountable, and how do you document that? And would you in fact need an air tower there in order to have more precise measurements of that, or are you able to get that presently under existing instrumentality?
We're not able to get that exactly. I believe the FSDO has a mechanism to make those determinations, but on the data that we receive and the information we have, we cannot make that determination. Again, I think FSDO does. The biggest part of your question there is, yes, the tower would be able to make sure that they ensure that, make sure they're flying at the appropriate levels, and make the corrections right there with the pilot.
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking through my notes. I might have gotten it all. We've used the phrase grant assurances several times. I'm presuming those grant assurances also include things related to safety and habitability. And, yes, you have to work in terms with the lease agreement, but if the lease agreement applies in this space and you have these grant assurances for the funding that has been utilized, taxpayer dollars, right, you've got to comply with that too. Presumably the lease holder, the lessee, is also bound by those grant assurances, right?
Yes, they are. According to the master lease agreement, they have to ensure that we remain in compliance with all FAA grant assurances. Thank you. I lost my mind there. But I did want to point out, too, that this is the interesting take on that, is that they are also protected by those same FAA grant assurances when it comes to doing business at the airpark. So as much as we want to say we can go after them for this or that, if the FAA grant assurances don't allow that and protects them under that way, so they're on both sides of it. They're protected in regards to that.
Sure, because the FAA does not want to restrict flight operations, right? That is a paramount goal of the FAA and its regulatory scheme. However, are you able to give us an example of something where this is a known problem, it's impacting people, whether it's residents or users of the airpark, where you have certain FAA grant assurances to comply with, but the lessee does as well, and there's a tension? What would one of those circumstances be, where you're then at an impasse because the grant assurances are hanging everything up?
I think I go back to the flight school and the issue that we dealt with last year. I think that's a perfect example of we're frustrated. We have all these concerns. We're raising it to multiple bodies of the FAA, and trying to get somewhere. We even challenged it on the renewal of the sublease, and all of that was deflated from us and taken away from us because of the FAA regulation came in and relicensed them.
So what does that challenge look like? Like, what's the process?
So the process was, first of all, the lessee came back to us renewing a license, a sublicense in that regards.
The lessee is the license holder, or the flight school is the license holder? Wouldn't the lessee be the lessor to the sublessee, which is the flight school, and the FAA is the one who authorizes the license? A lot of L's in all this.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yes, we get all the acronyms going. Yeah. But yes, our lessee was then sublicense in that. We raised concerns about their operations, their history, and some of the challenges that you referenced earlier in the discussion. We went back and forth with them and stated to them that we want to see a plan on how this is going to be addressed and how things are going to be handled in that regards, because we don't think we're going to authorize the reissuance of that sublease. We then also raised concerns and came back to, because they challenged us on the FAA grant assurances, we then went to the FAA and raised that challenge to the FAA and said, hey, this is where we stand right now, and we think this sublicense shouldn't be renewed, and these are our factors as to why. The FAA, as I stated at that point, recertified the flight school in their license. So they issued the license, the FAA issues the license to the
Right.
flight school. So they reissued that license to the flight school, which then basically took all ammunition and all the everything that we had that we could do, took it all away from us, because now the FAA grant assurances again kicks in that I cannot kick that flight school out, because the grant assurances, they're a licensed flight school, so therefore I cannot just kick them out. And that would be a violation of the FAA grant assurances, which then our lessee made us aware of, and we had to renew that license.
So, would you be able to get a copy to these two committees as well as to the ACAC of what the challenge was that you sent to the FAA with all the factors listed, so that we can have that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Randolph, my apologies.
Oh, no. So I do want to, along this same topic area, we have been seeing an increased presence from the FAA regarding maintenance. So the maintenance inspector has been out. I've personally seen him 3 or 4 times at the shop that I work with, and I know they're visiting the other maintenance facilities as well, including the flight school that has its own large maintenance facility. So we are seeing an increased helpful presence from them on the maintenance side. I will tell you from the flight side, and I just may be a little more proactive, I have filed multiple violations with the FAA on that flight school for runway incursions, for unsafe practices, with examples, with everything else. Now, I will tell you that the FSDO's response was, well, I don't have the name of the pilot, so I can't do anything. Well, the name of the pilot's in the logbook at the flight school. You can just go and get that. So there was no activity there. But I did take it a step further and met with the chief flight instructor of that large flight school. And I showed that individual all the evidence, and their concern, the first comment was, well, you're not going to go to the FAA with this, are you?
Right.
And we had a 1-hour discussion, and the end of the discussion, he said, you already went to the FAA, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did.
Yep.
So one of the things that the community can do, when I say the community, it's the pilots, it's MCRA, is continue to highlight these issues to the FAA, to the FSDO. Key in all of this is some of the recommendations are regarding the improvement of data collection and more accuracy of that data collection.
Right.
That, when we say, well, what is one of the goals of that? Well, one of the goals can be, in addition to educating people on noise abatement, like that flight school, is also to provide better accuracy in data that you can show the FAA, look, I got 8 planes in the pattern. You have planes strung out 6 miles on the downwind pattern all over the place, and show incidents like last Saturday when I came back from Philadelphia. I had a plane coming in right 400 feet above me, just not following the untowered guidelines to try to get into the pattern because the pattern was full. And I made evasive maneuvers and left the pattern immediately. And, these things happen. So better data collection can be utilized in that regard to provide more evidence to the FAA that, hey, this stuff's going on and we need to curtail it. And you can identify the end numbers, which then link it to, like, for example, if it's a flight school plane, that you can start to collect and provide this evidence to say, look, enough's enough, folks. We got to do something.
Right.
So,
And the current flight tower that guides is typically Pittsburgh, correct?
I'm sorry,
For the flight tower that provides, like the control tower for, yes.
For air traffic control?
Yes.
It would be Potomac, which is based out of Leesburg. Yeah.
Right,
Potomac,
okay.
Yeah, Potomac approach, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there a way to, highlight, at least to make, sort of more transparent on the website so that, we can direct constituents or people with concerns, understanding that the fly-friendly guidelines are guidelines, right? They're not law, they're not required by the FAA, but if they keep being violated, by the same people over and over and over again. To the point about data collection, to the point about collecting things together that you can marshal and elevate to get support for what's going on. While those aren't required, if someone is persistently flaunting something that others are seeming to comply with decently, then you know there's a behavioral problem there, right? So even though it's not mandatory and it's not a basis for taking away the license, it's indicative of, along with the other factors that have been documented, that this is not a good faith actor. And that's what I'd love to be able to see, and I'd love to be able to see that highlighted on the website, because that helps people to know what's going wrong, and that there are, in fact, it gives them assurance that MICRA's got eyes on it and that it is being monitored. And that is important to the community, and I think helps reduce down some of the, nobody's doing anything about this, when we are. Everybody's trying. But we got to find a different tactic and a more persistent, turn the notch up kind of way of dealing with this. And Dale's got his hand up.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the MCRA, the air park, does have a data collection system they put in place. And
yes.
It's quite effective. There are some modifications we recommended in the report to, as you suggest, to increase the specificity and accuracy of certain types of behavior. From a community impact, we've talked about this a little bit, from a community impact perspective, it's the touch and goes that are really impacting those of us living near the air park. I mean, you can have hundreds of touch and goes per day. That's not hyperbole. That's in the data. So, again, to your point, what we could do, one thing we've talked about a little bit, not extensively at our meetings, is what type of reports would help show who's doing what and when, right? How many touch and goes, and some of the recommendations that we've made would improve the capture of those types of that type of flight behavior. It is complex. You have to put data rules in and what you count, and there's going to be some error. But again, the system is there to do it. We've met with the vendor. They're able to do it. So there is a request in front of the committee to actually fund improvements to the reporting capabilities of that system.
And I know this system it's only like a couple years old, right? So like this is a good piece of work, right? You roll the thing out, you start using it, you see what data is collected, then you see how might it be more useful or more robust, and you work together and you modify it for moving forward. So, and I want to thank you for leading that data subcommittee. And just my final point, because it was mentioned in one of the reports or in the packet. Touch and go operations are not part of requirement for flight certification. You do have to take off, you do have to land, you have to fly, you have to do other things, but there's not a certain amount of touch and go that is required. And so, I mean, I've stood in the public safety training center parking lot having conversations with people and watched the same plane going down, coming back up, going back down, coming back up, in, the span of 45 minutes. And so that's the kind of thing that is so intrusive to the community when it could be handled in a better way. And perhaps if they are required to fly out further before they're making their approach and practice landings again, that the flight pattern congestion issues that Skip has mentioned would also be somewhat alleviated by having them have a wider trajectory in the operations that they're running. Just some food for thought. I want to thank the committee chairs for hosting, and with that, I am finished.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Luedtke, again, for your leadership on this and your thorough questions and comments. Appreciate the committee for your due diligence and your care, not only as users but as residents, and also as individuals who are looking out for the economic opportunities that the county needs to take advantage of. Thank you to the Revenue Authority for your thorough reporting and your your commitment to working with the community, recognizing that it is not just community and county, but it is the federal government as well. That we have to mitigate, and shout out to our federal partners who are helping soften things and work through FAA and other rules and regulations. But I want to go back to comments that Councilmember Stewart mentioned before in her opening. She said, this is about what's best for our community and our air park. And that is what this conversation is about. I do think that this 2-hour thorough conversation, 2 hours, is really the best of local government, in where we have competing odds, competing interests, competing opinions, but we have aired that in a very thoughtful, deep discussion. And we are committed to working through this. We will get through this. Councilmember Luedke will continue to lead those efforts here on the council, and I look forward to more conversations. So with that, appreciate my colleagues, appreciate you all, appreciate everybody who's following at home, and we are adjourned.